Hello everybody. Today we are talking about amps. We recently did a video talking about some of our favorite used and vintage guitars that you can find right now that are still a really good value. And someone left a comment saying you guys should do a similar thing on amps, and that's a great idea. So that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna talk about 5 different amps that you can find right now on the used and vintage market that I think are a really great value for what they are. Some of these are gonna be collectible amps, but definitely focusing more on stuff that's just good for the utility of what it is. Obviously a lot of awesome vintage gear has gotten really expensive and a bit unattainable for some of us. So I like to do these videos and kind of talk about some stuff that's still proper vintage or just older used stuff. This is stuff that we find like the utility of what it does is worth the price that these currently demand. These are in no particular order, but I will say number 1 is my favorite, and we are going to plug in 2 examples of that amp at the end, so stick around. Let's dig in. Number 5, and this is a really good one. This is going to be the 1970s Fender Twin Reverb amps, the later silver panel Twin Reverbs. These amps are absolutely exceptional, and they are some of the cheapest tube amps on the market within their class. It's wild that these amps are what they are and they still don't go for crazy money. The Fender Twin Reverb is obviously one of the classic Fender designs. These get really loud, lots of headroom, so you can get loud and clean in a way that most other Fender amps cannot provide. Most Fender amps, once you start cranking them up a bit, they will start to really break up, which is what's really great about them, but sometimes you just want loud and clean. If that's what you want, then the Twin Reverb is a great option. Now, the 70s Twin Reverbs, especially later 70s, have not gotten super collectible, so you can usually find these for notably less than a newer Twin Reverb reissue, and I still really like these amps. Obviously, anything Fender from the 70s is a bit of a debate on whether it's good or not, as for many years it was looked at as the 70s stuff isn't too great, but I think compared to a lot of newer stuff, I still really like the 70s designs. Maybe they're not as good always as the 60s or 50s designs, but I still like them for what they are. These Twin Reverbs haven't gotten very expensive since they're just so big and bulky, so if you're not opposed to a big amp that's really loud and you can't get it super quiet, the Twin Reverb, especially from this era, is a really great option. I will say it's nice that a lot of these come on casters, so they're nice and easy to roll around. They're quite heavy. Definitely a lot to deal with. A lot of amp, both in volume and in just moving it around. All right, number 4, the Marshall JCM 800, specifically those from the 80s and 90s. I would say the JCM 800 is one of the more modern classics, if you will, from Marshall. Obviously they started a long time ago, but they're not as iconic as the JTM or the JMP, but these are truly the Marshall sound, and a lot of great records that we all love have been made with the JCM 800. The 80s and 90s ones are definitely getting up there in price a little bit now, but they still haven't gotten too crazy. You can find a lot of good examples between $1,000 to $2,000 or even up to $3,000 for some of the more kind of collectible versions. But I know we somewhat recently had a 1985 2204 Marshall JCM 800, and it sounded incredible. The price it went for was nothing too crazy. It wasn't cheap by any means, but I would just say it was a very attainable price point, and it was all the Marshall sound. You can find these for less than a newer Plexi or JTM reissue, so definitely worth checking out. Overall, the older JCM 800s are super solid choice and a great way to get the Marshall sound with no compromise without getting into crazy vintage territory. It's not a JTM, it's not a Plexi, it's not that. It's definitely its own thing, but if you're into what the JCM 800 does, I would say now is a good time to get into them, as they just haven't got too crazy yet. Number 3, the 5150 series of amps, specifically the Peavey 5150s. And this one is mainly going to pertain to if you're doing anything in the heavier rock or metalcore, hardcore, anywhere in that kind of genre. The Peavey 5150 originally came out back in 1992 with the block letter version, and it's had a few different iterations over the years. In 1999, they made the 5152, which incorporated an additional channel, which was definitely much needed. Now you get 2 different sets of EQ. To me, that's my favorite version of these amps. In 2005, these were rebranded into the 6505 and 6505 Plus, but still retain the same design as the 5150 and 5152, still being made in the States. And it would stay that way until about 2015, when production was moved over to China and some changes are made to the design. I would recommend either getting an OG 5150 or 5152 or an older 6505 or 6505 Plus. Well, they were still made in the States. They're all the same design circuit for that series of amps. These are awesome. You can still find the later 6505 variations for $1,000 or less. The clean channel definitely leaves a lot to be desired, but you get these for the heavier channels and they sound exceptional. The first good tube amp I ever got was a 6505 Plus, which is right behind me. There's not much that I can say that hasn't been said a million times about these amps, but they really did change the sound of heavy music. And it is funny to think this just started as the signature EVH amp amp, but it kind of ended up taking on a whole life of its own. If you've never played one, you need to play one, as these are great. Number 2, and that's going to be the Gibson Skylark amps. This is probably the most underrated amp on this list, as I just don't see it talked about that much. I personally have a 1963 Gibson Skylark, and I absolutely love it. These amps, in the same way as the 5150, but in a very different way, do just one thing. Mine in particular literally has an on and off switch and just a volume. There's no EQ, there's no pre-post gain, it's just how loud do you want it? And as you drive it more and more, it breaks up more and more in a really musical way. These amps are great. They were never super expensive back in the day. They're not super expensive now. You can still find them for under $1,000. But as far as anything from clean to edge of breakup to, I would say, a pretty decent amount of saturation, these are awesome. I love the old Fender Champ amps as well, but I prefer the Skylarks to the Champs or even the Princeton Reverb. I know that might be a crazy take, but I love these. I don't think they're talked about enough. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's why they're not super expensive. So hopefully this video doesn't drive the price up at all. But yeah, these are awesome. Haven't gotten too unattainable yet. If you have a chance to play one, I would definitely check it out. So before we get to number 1, I am going to do an honorable mention, and that is going to be the Fender Deluxe Reverb reissue, specifically the 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue. Obviously these amps aren't like vintage or anything like that, so they're not like super collectible, but these are just solid, straight ahead Fender amps. I think it's a pretty faithful recreation of the classic mid-60s Fender Deluxe Reverb, but doesn't carry the crazy price tag. We did a whole video on this, but I way prefer the tube version to the Tone Master that ended up doing, and they're still not crazy expensive. They are very, very common. I know most of you guys already probably know about these, and they're certainly not like underrated, kind of the baseline for everything else to be compared to. Very attainable price point, great build quality, USA made tube amp, and it's one of the classic Fender designs, so yeah, definitely get my seal of approval. A lot of our demo videos are done just with the 65 reissue Deluxe. Number 1, and that is going to be the Fender Basement amps. And these are probably just my favorite amps ever. Specifically the black panel amps from 1963 to 1967. This is my favorite era of the Bassmans. I am lucky enough to have a 1964 Bassman and a 1967 Bassman in my collection. I love both these amps. I actually brought the 64 with me today, so we're gonna plug that in, see what it sounds like in just a moment. You can still find them for usually $1 to $2 grand. For the later years, they'll get a little more expensive. For the earlier years, 63, 64, and 65 can get a little pricey, but a 66 or 67 can still definitely be had for between $1 and $2 grand, depending on condition and all that kind of stuff. I even love the later Bassmans, and we're gonna check out one of those as well. From 72 to 76, you have the Fender Basement 50 as an option, and these are very attainable for around $1 grand. I don't like them as much as the black panel, but I still really like them, and as far as value goes, I think they're pretty much one of the best value amps that you can find, if that's what you want, if a Bassman is what you're going for. But these sound great on their own. They sound even better when you start running drive pedals through them. They break up really well. They drive just about any cab that you can think of very well. They're awesome. The Bassman is kind of like the studio's secret weapon, I know, for a lot of producers, and for very good reason. I also like the Showman amps. I like the Bandmasters, but of all those kind of older Fender heads, I think the Bassman for guitar is the one. These were originally a bass amp after all, but they just ended up working really well for guitar. First, let's check out the 1964. hope you guys have enjoyed hanging out and checking out some of these amps with us. Let us know down below in the comments what your favorite used or vintage amps are. There's a lot of great ones out there, and obviously this is not like some comprehensive list. This was just 5, I guess actually 6 amps that I really enjoyed that I wanted to include in this video. Let me know what other ones you guys are into down below in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share the video, and all that good stuff, and we will see you in another video soon. Bye.